Picture this. It's the year 2040. You've just turned 67. You walk into your local Woolworths in Brisbane, Melbourne, or Perth, and you reach for a loaf of bread that now costs around $9. A coffee at your favourite cafe is sitting at 11. Your weekly grocery bill, the one that used to be $250 back in 2026, has climbed past 500. And the retirement nest egg you spent decades building, the one that looks so impressive on paper, suddenly feels a lot smaller than you expected. This is the reality most Australians are walking into without realising it. Because while everyone talks about how much super you need to retire, almost nobody is talking about what that number actually means once inflation has done its work. Let's start with where we are right now. According to the latest ASFA retirement standard figures from the March 2026 quarter, a couple who owns their home needs around $78,566 a year to live what's called a comfortable retirement in Australia. For a single person, that number sits near $55,923. To fund that lifestyle, ASFA says a couple needs roughly $730,000 in super by age 67, and a single retiree needs about $630,000. Those are today's numbers, and already a lot of Australians are looking at their own super balance and feeling that familiar knot in their stomach. The average super balance for a 40 to 44-year-old male right now is around $140,000. For women in the same age bracket, it's closer to $109,000. That's nowhere near where it needs to be. If you're in your early 50s today, you're not retiring on $2,026. You're retiring on $2,040. And $2,040 are worth a lot less than what you're holding in your wallet right now. For anyone younger than that, 2040 isn't even your finish line. It's a checkpoint along the way to a retirement that costs even more by the time you actually get there. Someone who is 40 today won't reach 67 until 2053, which gives inflation another 13 years beyond 2040 to keep eating away at your purchasing power. The Reserve Bank tries to keep inflation between 2 and 3% a year, but right now things are tougher than that. In its May 2026 update, the RBA said headline inflation will peak at 4.8% in the June quarter of 2026. The deeper measure they track, called trimmed mean inflation, will peak at 3.8%. They don't expect it to drop back to the target range until 2027. The cash rate has been pushed up to 4.35% to fight it. Even once inflation slows down to the 3% target, prices still roughly double every 24 to 30 years. At 3% a year, $100 today will only buy you about $66 worth of stuff by 2040. The $78,566 a couple needs today will cost closer to $118,000 a year in 2040. For a single person, that comfortable life jumps from $55,923 to around $84,000 a year. And the super balance a couple needs moves from $730,000 to about $1.1 million. For a single person, it climbs to around $950,000, just to live the same kind of life retirees enjoy today. But here's what most Australians get wrong about inflation. They think it's just about prices going up. It's actually about time. Inflation is a slow tax on every dollar you don't put to work. If your money sits in a savings account earning 4% and inflation is running at 3%, you're only making 1% in real terms. Once tax takes its cut, you're going backwards. That's the trap millions of Australians are falling into right now. They feel safe because their bank balance isn't dropping. But what their money can actually buy is shrinking every month. Now here's the good news. Time, the same force working against your cash, is the most powerful tool working for your investments. Say a 35-year-old puts an extra $500 a month into a mix of shares and other growth investments. If that mix earns an average of 7% a year over the long run, they'll have around $760,000 extra by age 67. That's on top of what their boss is already paying into super. Start at 45 instead of 35. And that same $500 a month grows to about $325,000. Start at 55, and you're looking at about $108,000. The amount you put in each month is the same. What changes is how many years your money has to grow. That's the whole game. And it's why so many Australians, on average, incomes end up retiring with more than people who earn twice as much, but started 10 years later. So the talk about retirement in 2040 can't just be about how much you save. Three things have to work together. First, how early you start. Second, where your money actually sits. Third, how you protect yourself from inflation along the way. Real long-term wealth in Australia has been built through things like shares, ETFs, and for many people, property. Your super is part of that too, especially if you're young and have it invested in a higher growth option. There's another piece almost nobody talks about. Lifestyle inflation. Every time you get a pay rise and instantly upgrade the car, the rent, the streaming services, the weekend habits, you're locking in a higher cost of living. And that's a cost of living you'll need to fund in retirement too. It's not about cutting out the things you enjoy. It's about being smart with the extra money that shows up over your career. Every pay rise, every tax return, every bonus. Instead of letting it slip into upgrades you barely notice a month later, you send a chunk of it straight into your investments. There's also a tax angle worth your attention. When you put money into super through salary sacrifice, which means money taken from your pay before tax, it gets taxed at only 15% inside super. For most Australians, your normal tax rate is 30, 37, or even 45%. That gap, repeated over the years between now and 2040, can add tens of thousands of dollars to your final super balance, without you earning a single extra dollar at work. Right now, the most you can put in this way is $30,000 a year. But from the 1st of July 2026, just days from now, that limit goes up to $32,500. The after-tax limit also goes up from $120,000 to $130,000. That's an extra $2,500 a year you can move into super at the lower tax rate every year from this point on. And if you haven't used your full limit in past years, you may even be able to roll those unused amounts forward. So what does this look like in real life? It looks like logging into your super fund this week and checking what option your money's invested in. It looks like setting up a small salary sacrifice, then bumping it up on the 1st of July to take the new limit. It looks like opening a brokerage account and buying your first low-cost index ETF, even if it's just $100 a month to start. It looks like sitting down with your partner, opening a spreadsheet, and being honest about where the money's going. None of this needs you to be a finance expert. It just needs you to stop pretending the problem will fix itself. Retirement in 2040 is closer than it feels for a lot of Australians. We're at the end of June 2026. Anyone turning 53 this year will hit 67 in 2040. The choices you make in the next 12 months, what you invest in, how much you put away, how you handle every pay rise, will shape the life you live in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. Inflation won't slow down to let you catch up. It keeps growing whether you're paying attention or not. The question is whether your money is growing alongside it or losing the race. If this video opened your eyes to something you hadn't really thought about, do me a favor and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.